Off the Track is brought to you by Windsor Park Stud, your first choice for stallions.
Hi and welcome to another Off the Track. Steve Davis with you, brought to you courtesy of Windsor Park Stud, and I dare say they are absolutely doing handstands there at Windsor Park. Every stallion owner likes to see their stallion produce progeny that can compete at the top level, and Master Craftsman, he is setting them alight up there in the Northern Hemisphere. It is only a matter of time when we see them doing the same here in the Southern Hemisphere. Well done to the team. Windsor Park and Master Craftsman. Well, one man who is also at the top of his game is Gordon Cunningham, our guest today, the King of Curraghmore. How does that sit on your shoulders?
It's a big load.
I got to congratulate you, mate, with where you've come from. And there's a couple of beautiful quotes I'd like to mention. Sir Patrick Hogan, Gordon is a big asset to the industry. He does such a great job of presenting his horses, and I really hope he kicks on and he can put himself in the position to defend the well-earned title in the coming years. You've replaced Patrick after 31 years at the top. And what about this from Bruce and Maureen Harvey, Ascot Farm? It's good buying from Gordon because you know what you see is what you get, and they have been properly prepared. I mean, two of the bigger hitters in our industry saying that about you, Gordon.
Pretty good accolades, yeah.
I mean, it hasn't come easy though, has it? I mean, you've done a lot of hard work to get it.
I'm sure, look, every walk in life is hard work if you want to get anywhere, but to be honest with you, it's just been what I do, and I love it, and it has been easy.
People sitting at home probably that don't know you, Gordon, realise that with your accent you're not from here, so let's take you back.
Okay.
Take you back to Ireland, family. I mean, what is it with the Irish and horses? I mean, there's just an empathy there, isn't it?
I was thinking about it the other day there, and you're probably right. It's almost similar to New Zealanders picking up a rugby ball, you know. And we grew up with horses. We did lots of other things as well, so
your family was very much involved in racing horses?
Yeah, Mum's dad was granddad trained. He was a very good trainer on the Curragh for his time, and he had three boys of my uncles, and they're all involved in the game back home, and basically gave me the avenue to proceed my own life and career. Big
families too, I understand. Yeah, your
mother's... Well, Mum was from one of 6 or 7, and I'm from one of 8. So,
one of 8?
Yeah.
No TV, Catholics?
There was TV. I remember when we got TV, all right. yeah.
But it was just the norm, was it, back, you know, when I say back in those days? But,
yeah,
it
absolutely,
was just the norm. I mean, the Irish way of having big families. I mean, one of 8, what's the breakdown, girls and boys?
5 boys, 3 girls. Could have been 1 or 2 more, I think, in between, so somehow a bit of misfortune maybe.
Yeah, okay. And so 1 of 8, what was school like for you?
Sure, look, it's just probably like my little fellas now. We just did what we did. And
were you any good at going to school?
I worked hard enough. I wasn't naturally the sharpest in the world, but did okay.
Yeah, and being 1 of 8, were you exposed to horses early in your life, or?
Look, Mum and Dad and just our family involvement always had us really, I suppose, as far as back as I can remember, I remember going to the races.
Yeah? Were you a little punter or what?
Yeah. We'd sort of have our little spot in the stand right at Trackside, at the Trackside race meeting, and there might have been 13 meetings a year.
What was it like as a track? Was it those typical long straights? I mean, you saw like little specks in the distance as you were?
Ours was like, Trackside was one of the, got all the bad horses, really. It was like Tiamutu on the hill. Right, so short, straight, up and down and whatnot.
You know, Tiamutu got to get a fixation because Rhys Jones gave him a bit of a serve last week too. You just give them another one there.
I like Tiamutu. But so look, that's really with my uncle training, and you just followed it all. So there was always.
Other sport? Were you involved in other sport?
Loved soccer, loved football.
Yeah.
Played a bit of Gaelic football, but pretty much it was soccer and racing, really. You know.
And the academic side, I think, just filled in.
Well, it did to a point, but like I remember, it was okay when we were at primary school. We could get a note to say we were going to the races with Mum and Dad that day. When we went to when I went to secondary school, it was a bit more serious. So there wasn't an obvious reason to get off school, so I joined the Order of Malta, which was like the St. John ambulance.
Oh, okay.
So, and I'd have to attend with, that gave me a reason to go to the races. My first aid kit and my grey beret on.
Yeah.
Get in the ambulance with the jockeys who had fallen off and
Have a bit of a chat.
yeah, go down and have a bit then in between races.
Were you inspired to ride yourself, or?
Somehow not really.
Yeah.
Everybody asked me that, but not really. I'd say I like the coordination, you know.
Yeah, it was something you aspired to. See, I always aspired to be a jockey, and you know, I just grew.
Yeah, no, more for me, particularly when my dad died. I was pretty young, 11, and we spent. So my Uncle Dick, he took me and my brother under his wing for the summer holidays, etc.
That's a hell of a setback with your father dying at 11. I mean, my father died when I was 20, but I mean 2021. But I mean, 11's a hell of an impact.
Yeah, in retrospect, yes, you know, or should I say, in retrospect, at the time, life was happening so quickly. Everybody was there for us, etc., etc. It's actually 20 years on you realise the impact it had, and you might have been still coping with it 20 years later, you know.
And what an impact on your mother. I mean, left with 8 kids.
Yeah, she was incredible, yeah, absolutely. And she's terrific. She's still going strong. And
that's good.
Yeah.
So ring her up for Christmas and things. Has she been out to New Zealand?
She's been out here, yeah. I ring her actually, at the moment I ring her after most foalings, you know, during the night.
Yeah, okay, because the timing.
Timing good.
Yeah.
Another.
So it was your uncle that got you going? One of your uncles?
Look, it was just something that we did every summer and every holiday, and I can remember you were just totally absorbed in the whole process. You just loved the horses. Myself and my brother and my cousins.
Yeah.
You know, any spare time was with the horses.
Mucking out and doing things like that?
Oh, absolutely, and getting to lead the broodmares in out of the paddock, or getting to lead the yearling in after. This is when we were 11 or 12, and going down and helping the night man at night. And
all the foundations which you now refer back to.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, that's really it's just the smallest things in the world you did. You know, what are sort of, I keep going back to our ancestors, what they've worked out without any science. It's existed in those days, you know.
So when did your break really come for you to really go to that next level?
That's just transpired the whole way, really. I was always going to, horses were always going to be in my career. So when my friends or schoolmates were there in the career guidance classes, processing applications, mock applications for the banks or university or whatever, I really had nothing to write down about, because there was no avenue with horses, only just to go and work with them, you know. But however, there was the Irish National Stud, which is had at that stage
scholarships.
Well, it had its own stud management course.
Right. It's still going now.
It is, yeah. It's still going now, and there's, you know, lots of successful people in the world began a formal little bit of training in the horse game through that course. So through my connections and application, I suppose my uncle paved the way for me to get accepted into that. And
so how old were you when you went into the Irish National? 17, 18.
Yeah.
Uncle dropped you off, you say?
He dropped me off, told me a little bit about it, and I'd go home and see them.
Wave goodbye.
Not really, not really. It didn't wave goodbye. They were always there, but sure, look, there was 30 of us there, all with something in common. Loved horses, liked to bet.
And those 30 now, do you still keep in touch with many of those people? Or
absolutely, yeah. Just look, the horse game is incredible. They'll turn up anywhere. I was back in Lexington there in July for the first time in 20 years. It was like I'd never left.
Yeah, it is a little bit like that, isn't it? The same faces there, a bit like going to the races, except they're just getting older and greyer and losing our hair. Hey, Irish, when was your first trip overseas?
So immediately after that, I got an opportunity to go and work in Western Australia with one of the lads who was on the course there. So I was 18.
Well, that was a bit of an eye-opener, going from Ireland to Western Australia.
We'd had a big night the night before. I started won the King George. Big day at the Curragh. My uncle had a double.
Yeah.
Left the next morning. My brother had been to the Rolling Stones. They all came to the airport, and I was ready. I was quite excited, and came to say goodbye, and they were all in tears.
Yeah.
I couldn't.
You couldn't get on the plane?
I couldn't really work out what they were crying about.
Oh, right.
Until I turned my back. And I realised all these years later how big it was. I was 18 years of age going to the other side of the world, Yeah,
especially with the upheaval, your father dying at the age of...
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And because that would bring you together as a family, I'm sure.
Sure, it does in every... It does in every...
So you come to Western Australia, all the flies, learning to brush them away, and then where do you go from there?
I worked at a farm there, Eucalypt Park. We stood 3 stallions, 3 good stallions too. There was a horse called Manicle who was the sort of Moor style, he was a champion sprinter. Averoff, who went on and became a very good sire in South Africa.
Right.
And loved the racing there, loved a great time. The farm was owned by a good family who embraced me and
looked after you.
Really looked after me, yeah. And so that was terrific. And from there, I got the opportunity to go to Kentucky.
Okay. And
worked at took up a job at Creekview Farm, just outside Lexington, which was at the time was Coolmore's private farm.
Okay, that's early 80s. I mean, I would imagine the whole the setup of Coolmore was very in its infancy.
Well,
John Magny and things like that.
Well, they didn't actually have a stallion base in those days in Lexington, so it was purely a base for them to breed their American stallions. I think we had 11 Northern Dancers on the farm that year.
Yeah.
We had all those just beautiful fillies that Vincent O'Brien bought as yearlings.
You say us because you do become part of that family, and obviously the association, which we're going to find out later, has stuck with you all these years with Coolmore.
Well, you always, you sort of, you're one, basically.
John Magnier and Michael Kerwin, was he around in those days?
Yeah, well, when I went back, a friend of the Calvin Flavel was the friend of mine who I went to Western Australia with.
Right.
He was to come and join me in Kentucky, and he got killed in a car accident. So I suppose that threw me out a little bit. Mm. Well, it certainly did. And by Christmas time, Mr. Magner had come. They'd been over to look at their horses and said to me if ever I wanted to go back to Ireland, or when I was going back to Ireland, to make sure to give them a call. So I duly did, and Coolmore was in its infancy at that stage in terms of the expansion of where, it was very early days. So went to Coolmore the following January. And
so what were the roles you had at Coolmore then?
Well, it was like everything. Just went there as a young lad and worked hard and put your hand up, just like Michael. There was 5 or 6 assistant managers that are later to go on and have played big roles throughout the world, Mm-hmm. So looked after barn area, whatever. And then really what transpired from there in those days, they weren't shuttling stallions.
Okay.
So I suppose to further their team, their people, they sought opportunities for us in the Southern Hemisphere or wherever we could go, whether it be going to Kentucky to work the sales over there or...
You met a guy at this stage too, Joe Foley, who's going to play a part later on when we talk about your own stallions.
Yeah, Joe did a season there in the foaling unit with Joe, and he later went home and got his own farm up and running, and
So you came out in the off-season over to New Zealand, got introduced to David Benjamin, who had links with Kentucky anyway through...
Yeah, that's right, and David collected me from the airport and came, and we had Grosvenor there. We had his first crop of foals.
Fieldhouse, this is.
Yeah, at Fieldhouse, and they were terrific. They were... Look, there's so many people over the years that you were always very appreciative of what they did for you, but in hindsight, they were amazing. Macy, who had been, she was from Kentucky, so they were always looked after. They had a group of people that came down every year from overseas and looked after them as though they were own. Then there was John Thompson's dad.
Colin Thompson.
Colin Thompson, he was our vet, and, they took me in as well,
Yeah. Oh, you're a likeable person, Gordon.
Well, sure look.
Do you find, I've got to say this, do the Irish accent, that open a few more doors for you when you get away from Ireland? You know, in regards to horses, that there's sort of, as I said, there's this belief that the Irish have this empathy with horses.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think so. But at the same time, it only goes so far. Mm-hmm. You know, yeah.
So you went back to Ireland, and then you got the call up to come back out to work at Waikato Stud.
Yeah, well, I came back and did another season with David at Fieldhouse, which and that was, I could see myself progressing anyway, because I suppose my aim was also always to learn as much as quick as possible. Mm-hmm. So by doing I was counting my breeding seasons, you know.
Yep.
So in 3 years I'd done 5.
Yep.
That was the sort of medium for learning, you know. And I've lost count now, but...
Yeah, was it always your view that you'd have your own place? Or at least be a manager of a major stud, I suppose? Was that the aspiration of that?
Oh, I suppose, yeah. I think that if when I was a little fella, what am I going to be? I'm going to be a stud manager. You know, that's what it would have been. So eventually, spent a year in Kentucky doing a lot of just working around a lot of sales, and might have let the hair down a bit too. And
those days are behind you now, mate.
And waiting for the opportunity to come up, and it did at Waikato Stud.
Yeah.
And went there as broodmare manager, soon to take over the farm.
What a hell of a lineup you had too, and that first year you put through Courtsa. You had Courtsa.
Yeah, I can still see her. Yeah, she it was the first year at Curraghmore.
Yeah.
And she had a good pedigree. She was by Pompey Court, out of Hunza. Hunza was a good mare, but she produced 3 good handicapping stakes horses, and but she was an outstanding filly. Physically, like she was the filly on the sale ground.
Right.
Nick Cullum and Ross MacDonald, Jack Soul had seen her at the farm while the Waikato sales were on, and they knew then they virtually celebrated when they saw her. They were going to buy her.
Yep, that was it.
That was on the back of Impazira, who'd won the Caulfield Cup that year, or Tristar. You know, so.
They had plenty.
They had plenty, but they had wicked confidence in what they were buying, you know.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so they had her, Courtsa, and then you worked there at Waikato Stud for some...
But I'll tell you, next year, by the time we got back to Curraghmore next year, she hadn't run.
Right.
And I remember I organised John Keneally to travel over with it. They celebrated big time when they bought her. John Keneally, who's got a farm in Melbourne now, he travelled over with her back to McDonald's. And they came back the next year and said she'll run next week, she'll win the Prelude, the Bright Diamond Prelude, she'll win the Blue Diamond, and then she'll run the Slipper. She did all of that.
Yeah, outstanding.
That's how...
So how did she end up coming back to Waikato?
Well, it coincided with Nick having an arrangement with Elders Finance at the time.
Right.
He obviously had there was post the 87 crash, I suppose, so he had to do a lot of restructuring. And the best way for him forward was to put a really elite group of his race mares or brood mares into the equity into Waikato Stud, where he became chairman.
Okay, so Courtsa came, and of course O'Reilly came next. We're going to take a little break here on Off the Track. Back with Gordon Cunningham shortly as we work out through the life and times of the King of Curraghmore.